Welcome to The Hype is Real, a podcast for revenue leaders by revenue leaders, brought to you by Outplay and RevGenius. I'm Laxman, the CEO and co-founder of Outplay, and I'm joined by Jared Robin, the co-founder of RevGenius. And this season, we are speaking to powerful women leaders. Our guest is known for taking Tableau from 5 million in revenue to $1 billion in an IPO. And she knows growth, scale, building disruptive brands, and everything around data-informed decisions. She also advises fast-growing companies, serves on multiple boards, plus teaches at the University of Washington. We are very fortunate to have Elissa Fink join us for this episode. Welcome, Elissa.
Thanks, Laxman and Jared. Great to see you guys and chat with you, of course.
Thank you. So we'll start with a quick question around, because I was going through one of your earlier podcasts. I think that's from 21 or 2020. And I really loved your story of how you started off with an English major and then into sales. And then all of a sudden you've decided, no, I think I'm good at marketing. Right. So I would love our listeners to know the story, because a lot of people are like, okay, once you're into sales, it doesn't mean that you have to die as a salesperson. You can just find whatever you love in between, right? I think your story is inspiring. So please take us to the quick story.
Sure. Well, the funny thing is, it's one of these things that I've kind of just always kind of pursued what's interesting. And only in looking back did I see sort of a theme or a thing, So I think even being an English major was more by default than choice. Like when I left high school, I was like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I don't know what I want to study. Everything's kind of interesting to me. And so, I ended up as an English major. And then getting out of college with an English degree is sort of like being trained to do not very much. And, the great thing about sales is it's an opportunity for almost anybody to participate and to be successful in it. And I think that what happened for me is I've always been really interested in how people behave, why they do the things they do. And I think in a lot of ways, that's my love of being a reader, an English major. It's just interesting to read fiction and nonfiction about why people do what they do, their interior thoughts. So I think that's why at the end I became an English major, and then getting out of college, sales is really interesting because it's like, why do people do what they do? Now you're working on an individual level. And I think for me, what I found is I was just really interested in it as more of a group thing, understanding overall, like why people to a certain stimulus might do what they do. And I started taking extension classes. This is down in LA at UCLA. And I got into a market research class and I was really interested. And so I just got lucky. A company that I was really interested in had done, a guy came in and spoke about it, had an ad in the newspaper. Can you believe it? And these are the days of the newspaper, classified ads, for needing a client service person, which we might call today customer success. Guy took a chance on me. My boss took a chance on me, saw somebody really interested. The other boss that interviewed me, his boss said, she doesn't know shit. Literally, she doesn't know shit, but it's your funeral if you want to hire her. And fortunately for me, he said, yeah. And that got me started in market research. I was still in sales and still in customer success, but it really got me interested in market research, data, computers. We were an early software platform for marketers. And I realized, wow, I had found my passion. And so I think it's, a question of people following their interests, their passions. A lot of times those intersect with what you love to do. So I encourage people when they ask me, I don't know what to do. I say, well, what's the first thing you like to do at work? What's the stuff you put off until the end of the day? It's the stuff you put off at the end of the day that you don't want to do. It's the stuff you attack with vigor that you do want to do. And so I found myself really, that helped me realizing that I really loved marketing and data and computers, technology. And that's how I kind of stumbled into it. But again, I look back and I sort of see a common theme in all my choices. And it's just sometimes you're not aware. So trust yourself, trust your intuition, because you can find the path to what the right thing for you is. Yeah.
And trust the newspaper. I don't want to be, I don't want to. So a couple quick anecdotes. My dad's best friend started off before becoming the president of Luminox watches worldwide.
Oh, cool.
answering a newspaper ad to be like a territory rep first.
Uh-huh.
Second, pretty sure Mark Cuban, love him or hate him,
Yeah.
he respect him nonetheless. He
Yes.
answered a newspaper ad, and as the story goes, he wore his like favorite $99 suit and to
Absolutely.
some IT thing. So it's funny, humble beginnings, but
Totally.
going from your interest, natural interest in marketing and all of that, like you went to join. What brought you to join Tableau? Was it
Oh,
just like
yeah.
all the English stuff and marketing, or did you get into data along the way?
I know. I definitely when I was selling for the Wall Street Journal. Actually, when you sell advertising, you do sell a lot on audience demographics. So I started to realize that I love data. I love market research, as it was called back then. People didn't really call it data; they called it market research. I realized I love that, and so that kind of led me to just agree that even though I had reached, I was not a great salesperson. I have to admit, I was a really good opener, not a great closer. I think as a marketer, that's a good trait, but not for a salesperson. You got to be a closer, right? So I was pretty mediocre. But what I realized while I was there is I really loved the discussion of like the numbers and why you bought this and why this audience is right for you, and that kind of took me to that whole idea. And so I did start working a thread that was about technology and data and databases. And for many years, I worked with companies to help them understand their customer profiles, to analyze their marketing databases. I did a lot of B2C marketing through a B2B company that helped B2C marketers. And so when I stumbled upon Tableau, I was like an Excel junkie, man. I worked Excel. I was not, I could not write, I can write a SQL statement, the most basic, but I was not really trained in technology. So I was one of these abusers of Excel. I just abused it to help me do my analytics. And so when I stumbled across Tableau, I realized, wow, this thing is exactly how I've been wanting to work with data forever. It lets me see it, it lets me do it. And so I just was stunned. And then they needed a marketing VP. And so I was like, oh my God, I have to get this job. I remember telling my friends, I don't care what I have to do. This is an amazing product. It's exactly what I have passion for and interest, and I'm a marketer, so I'm perfect for them, whether they know it or not. So I fortunately used my sales skills to put on an all out campaign to get that job. I reached out to them in every way I could find. They were a tiny company, and it just kind of happened. But it was kind of kismet. It was really kind of like a combination of everything that mattered. And one thing I want to mention though, before I forget, is like, I can't tell you how much I value my sales experience. And I tell marketers all the time, even in coming to Tableau and working at Tableau, and then just, if you're a marketer and you have sales experience, it's gonna help you so much. It's just gonna help you. It just helps you understand customers at the most basic level. Most granular level. Helps you understand the sales cycle. It helps you understand why people care, how hard it is to persuade people. It gives you a lot of empathy and sympathy for the sales teams you work with. And so I just think it makes you a better marketer. And frankly, like Jared, your friend's dad, I'm sure being out in the field just made him better at every part of that company. And I do believe that's true for marketers. I mean, if you have an opportunity in your career, an early career, to get some sales experience or leverage that sales experience, it's good no matter what role you're in, because it just gives you that empathy and understanding of the customer and of how hard it is to be out there as a salesperson, making it happen. So so when I came to Tableau, I think, being such a small company, everybody's selling. I mean, everybody's selling. It was kind of a joke that you had to sell to your family. You had to sell to your family and friends. Everybody had to sell to their family and friends. And I think it just makes you a better marketer. And I think that skill of being empathetic with sales, understanding the sales process at the most, in here, the most basic level, very valuable. And so I think all that kind of led me to Tableau. Yeah, I was really very fortunate.
Wonderful. That's a great tip for anyone in sales with a marketing passion, wants to move. You can use this as a
Yeah.
pitch to hustle your way.
Yeah, you can, it's just something like being in a meeting when you say, I talked to 5 customers and this is what they said. I mean, it's just, no, it's just, I always tell my marketers, oh my God, I love secondary research, market research data, but there's just something that makes it so visceral and real about talking to customers. So I always used to tell marketers, get out there and talk to customers one-on-one, learn about them, and it's going to just enrich every part. It doesn't act as a full substitute for really understanding the marketing landscape or customers as a whole. You really do have to look at data, of course, but there's something about a personal interaction, the story you hear from a customer that just makes it all that much more real, that much more visceral, that much more, useful actually in everything you do.
One quick note. I came from a sales background as a founder, and I've noticed other founders that come from sales backgrounds end up being massive marketing fans, because this is how scaling a company with sales looks, right? And scaling a company with marketing is that hockey stick, and the sellers, as they try to like square peg round hole it with like sales tactics to scale, they realize fast, like, I'm gonna burn out and we're not gonna get any benefit.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember there was this when I worked at the Wall Street Journal on Mondays. Mondays were not a big ad day, so we used to run this ad, and it still sticks in my mind. And it was some guy sitting at his desk with his arms crossed, going, "I've never heard of you. I've never heard of your company. I've never seen any of your products, and you want me to buy something from you?" And the idea was, branding and advertising opens the door. And I think now more than ever, that's true. Even in today's incredibly digital world where we can track people and we can find leads and we can find prospects, there's still so much to making the sales process that much faster and easier by taking out all that drudgery work. I remember my lead list was, my boss would hand me a newspaper, the local newspaper, and say, call all these companies because they have ad dollars. But I'd look at them and I'd be like, I don't think they're targets for the Wall Street Journal. But he'd be like, call every one of them. So the drudgery work, I think marketing can really help salespeople and the whole revenue. It does help you really hone in on who you need to talk to and what they need to know about you and their awareness of you. It just makes it so much shorter. I mean, we all know the stats, 60%, 80% of the journey happens before you even interact with a salesperson, and even 20, 30, 40% of that happens before sales is even, before marketing's even aware of who the prospect is. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into the prospect's mind that can shortcut what a salesperson has to go through and make them more effective at the end. Again, a great salesperson is a great closer. And like I said, I was not a good closer.
So, it's funny you say that, because like it's dripped down to the product being open for better marketing. Product-led growth, right? Like right down to the product, and
right down to the product. Absolutely.
It's
so much
the
like
Tableaus of the world.
Yes, I mean, Tableau, that was, we didn't call it product-led growth back in 2007, but it totally was. I mean, we had this free trial, and then we had a free product that we also introduced a few years later, 4 or 5 years later. And man, I'm telling you, that was like gold. I mean, that was gold. Of course, you got to have a product that gives a great experience. I mean, and that, I think, more than anything, is really something for both sales and marketing and development all to work together on. What is the experience from the very first, interaction with the company and the brand, to the very first interaction with the product, or even signing up for the product, to their use of it, to their training around it, or their education around it, to their success with it. Are they getting results out of it? And is it happening pretty quickly? So that whole experience thing is a big deal.
Cool, wonderful. And PLG is the most talked about in the founders VC circle. Every marketer talks about PLG. Every company moves into PLG, right?
Yeah, they sure try to. Yeah. But you can't, there's some products that really is easy to do that, and other products pretty hard, so you really have to, but again, going back to like, be truthful about the experience. What's it really going to be like, for customers?
Everyone is taking a shot, which is a good thing for our consumer, right? So you don't have to go through those long sales cycles and fill a lot of forms even before looking at those first screens of the product.
Yes. Yeah. It makes a big, I remember, it's funny, you reminded me, when I first joined Tableau, we did have a free product, but you had to talk to a salesperson before they gave you a key. And one of the first things I did when I got there, I was like, you guys are nuts, man. We are not doing that anymore. You know what I mean? They're getting a key right away. If they still need a key, we're processing them right away, whether they talk to a sales rep or not. The salespeople at the first thought, what are you talking about? No, this is how I get a conversation. And I was like, and how many conversations do you actually get of people who request the key? And it wasn't a very, it was a decent amount, but it wasn't huge. So finally we convinced and started handing out the key early. And pretty soon you got it right away, or you didn't need a key. I can't even remember how it works now, but it meant higher conversions. People, once they started playing with it, of course they wanted to talk to a sales rep, because like, tell me more about this thing. It works great for me, yeah. So it's kind of funny.
Diving into data, what kind of, I know this is a few years ago. I don't want to date the Tableau, but like, what kind of experiments did you run that stood out, where like the data just told you something completely different? It's like the key thing, that's one.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things is, I do remember one of the things is realizing that another thing that when I first got there is they were only doing live webinar training twice a week. And I said, no, yes, keep doing that. But people got to be able to do it when they want to do it. Are you serious? You want me to show up at 8 o'clock or 11 o'clock on a Tuesday or a Thursday? No way, man. And then I'm never going to get to it. So I remember the trial, the test of let's do recorded trainings, recorded webinars. Let people sign up for them or take it whenever they want it. And the close rates and the ability to show like, hey, when we don't feel like we have to be live with them, like just the same thing, you have to talk to us to get a key, you have to hear it live. No, we recorded several, and bam, right away we could see in the data it increased the conversion rates to sell. It just totally got people more engaged with the trial, and then they just bought at better rates because they could do it on their time frame. And so stuff like that in the early days was really fun. It was really fun. That was one. I'm trying to think of some other stuff. There was I just remember certain things about our paid search ads as well that we would do a lot of testing around, and just being surprised at like, wow, I love that. Again, the reason I came to marketing and research and data was because I love the idea of how consumers behave. And so I always love when I see a little surprise, like, really, why did they prefer that one over this one? Why is that one converting so great? And then you start to go, oh yeah, I get it. And you always kind of fall into like, yeah, the consumer knows, man. They're in the flow. They know what they want. They want the easiest, simplest, most direct path to getting their problem solved. And so, you can really see that in how you express subject lines and, like I said, landing pages. And it was really fun to look at that, because it was still pretty early days for data. We didn't have everything we needed, but we were, pretty, we're a data-oriented company, right? We sold software for data. So yeah, we tried to capture as much as we could, and it was really fun to look at that, the conversion rates, and just what worked and what didn't. But I do remember, particularly around the training, I remember that was a pretty early one that we were like, hey, yeah, we got to put more training out there. People who take training are going to sell. In fact, what was funny is we discovered there were a lot of people, especially as we got a little more known, that would watch the training video and never take a trial. Because they either didn't want to give us their download information to open up the trial, because we required like your email and your first name and last name and company name, blah, blah, blah. And so they would watch the training videos as a substitute for the trial. Because what we would see, we would see is people who took training with no trial were very apt to close. People who took a trial were apt to close, and people who trial and training were apt to close. So it was just really interesting to see. Like, I don't think I would have looked at that or called that. Maybe I would have, but I think it's just a faster way. I don't have to learn it. I watch it. I go, yeah, this does what I needed to do. It was amazing.
Did you A/B test?
Not really. We didn't really A/B test that.
Because it sounds like you did it.
Yeah, well, we sort of saw people who only took training, and
without calling it as an A/B test.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah. But I love a good A/B test. I really do. I love the learning of it. Yeah, I really do. And I love explaining why people do the unexplainable, or what seems unexplainable when you first look at it. Like that. Yeah. And my hypothesis on that was, and I think we did look at this, was that people who took training only were a little more senior, like a VP of IT or a senior director wasn't likely to get their hands dirty so much, but they did want to see, what is it you're buying, or what is this thing? And so that I think also came to bear too. And I think when you go to product-led growth, that's another thing to think about, is you have to think about your user, versus your buyer and how those overlap and how they influence each other. Because a lot of times your buyer is not going to be hands-on. And so you still need to help them understand the product and very, real in real terms, like what does it do? And not just, oh, we help you modernize your infrastructure, blah, 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 whatever. But actually, here's what we actually do. Because even at high levels, they want to know, explain it to me in like real English, like what does it do? So I think the training video for an executive or a senior person was a useful thing.
So Tableau today, Salesforce property, Tableau,
Yeah.
when you came to it,
Yeah.
small team.
Yeah, very small, very small.
I'm sure the initial days were like challenging, more there's different challenges at all phases, understood. But do you recall like a few things that you and your team learned along the way that like a startup founder would find useful?
For a startup founder, yeah, sure. I mean, I think, well, one of the things that when you're growing is, yeah, it's hard. It's definitely hard because on one hand, and this applies anyway, but particularly in the early days, is you're trying to grow the business. I mean, the money, the revenue, the pipeline. You're trying to grow that, man. You got to keep growing that, and you're also trying to scale a company and scale a team. And sometimes I think that balance is really hard to obtain. And I think one of the things that sometimes I see is companies, and it's hard, they sometimes err on the side of, well, I need to scale, so I'm going to bring in some complicated systems and do all this stuff, and then I'll get revenue and pipeline right, or I'll get pipeline right, because then I'll be able to scale stuff. But I think at the same time, you have to be just like, I've got to build pipeline. I've got to build revenue right now. And in a lot of ways, and I still say this, I sometimes say pipeline is permission. I mean, when I came into Tableau, I was very focused on like, okay, how are we going to generate opportunities for our salespeople to talk to qualified leads? How do we build this pipeline? How do we build that whole thing? But I was also very much like, ugh, we're going to grow fast, man. And these, we were using, oh my God, one of the, like, an old email system that, was for like businesses that had 10 employees kind of thing, but I knew, whoa, we're going to get way past this fast, so I was like, I'm coming in, we're bringing in an email automation system, email marketing automation system. And they were a little bit like, really, do we need that? I'm like, yeah, we need this now. We need to get it going now because we're going to be in a position where this is going to matter. So I think one of the hardest things as a startup founder is really finding that balance and making sure that the people that work for you understand that challenge and are open about that challenge. And they're like, look, I got to keep the pipeline going, but I got to scale too. So I'm going to make these these trade-offs. Like, I'd love to have this, and this system. I'd love to have an A/B testing system and a marketing automation system and an ABM system and a blah, blah, blah. But I can't bring them all in at the same time. So I'm going to stage them in, and we might lose some opportunities along the way because we're not ready to bring all these things in. But here's my plan, because I got to focus on pipeline. I got to keep doing the pipeline thing. So I think it's, for a startup founder, it's finding people who can scale and build the pipeline at the same time, but be better. But the more they're upfront about how hard that is, and the more they're upfront about like might be some trade-offs, that we might have to make down the road or now, where we can't, we could use that system, but we can't get it all in. I think that's a good. So I think that's something that I think came true for us, like recognizing that as you're scaling and building pipeline, they're connected motions, but two very different motions. I'm sorry for that background noise. We're having a little work done at the house today. So I think that's one thing that I think for me was like pretty important to keep it top of mind, learning wise, is how do we balance those things?
Now I have a question. Like, how do you balance the need to generate pipeline to stay in business and to grow your company with a North Star metric that probably isn't revenue driven, right? It's probably a metric that strongly correlates with value of your customer, your prospect, whoever you're selling to solve their actual problems. And if it's not that.
That's a great question. That's a great question, because I do remember many times where we, being a data-oriented company, metric-oriented company, but also a very brand-oriented company. We were very conscious about the brand we were building and the kind of community we wanted and the kind of people we wanted to attract, from hiring to customers as well, the kind of companies. And there were times I remember, like my day-to-day metrics or week-to-week metrics, that I might say, We're going to sacrifice a little on that because it's not in keeping with our sort of North Star metric of, brand awareness, who we stand for, what we look like, and all that kind of good stuff. So there were times when I made the judgment call, and I had a lot of support from our CEO, who was, like you said, not a former salesperson, but the first salesperson and a real student of sales, and therefore was very supportive of marketing, like you said. He understood that. He was like, "Hey, Elissa, we're going to have times where we're going to trade off. You're going to tell me this marketing campaign could perform better if I did this. And we're going to say, no, we're not going to do that because it doesn't suit the brand." So for us, I think there were times when the idea of our brand was our North Star, and we would not compromise, but yeah, maybe a suboptimally do some things that we could have gotten bigger leads, more opportunities. Now, in terms of a metric, though, a North Star metric, that's a harder one. I mean, that's one of those things that, I was very lucky because I worked at Tableau and I had this incredible software that I could use, this app that was incredible. And so I could look at all kinds of data. So I did, we were very metric oriented. And so we were constantly looking, but I was always looking at like awareness, search volume, all kinds of different synthetic things for volume, customer satisfaction, social mentions of us, things that told us that people were engaging with our brand, but weren't necessarily brand awareness, the one metric.
Yep.
Because that was really important. Like, are we engaging people? Are they going to be our brand advocates? Are more and more people talking about us? In a positive way. Those were really important metrics. And even if there were things that we did that didn't turn into overnight revenue, or revenue that quarter, even that year, I was still very committed to them. But I was very lucky because the company also recognized the importance of the brand. So for example, we had our customer conference very early. We had 180 people, customers at our first conference. And some of the company was pretty skeptical. They were a little skeptical about it. And I promised we'll break even on it, and we did. And then after that, though, people realized, like, wow, we've got an opportunity with the community, with people who, so I had a lot of support for this idea of who we are, who we stand for, and why we got to stay true to that. And then, of course, measuring that was some of those sub metrics I just described. Your brand search volume, your social media engagement, your sentiment, your website traffic, even just things like that. Mentions in the media, things like that would all come together to sort of say, okay, we are going to stay true to who we are and how much people know about us, but in a positive way, because we strongly believed, and I still do, strongly believe in, like, a great brand will attract the right prospects, turn into happy customers, who turn into brand advocates, who then echo and amplify your brand, which turns into great prospects, which turns into great customers, who then turn into brand advocates, and so on. The cycle continues. So that idea of the community, the brand advocacy, was a really early thing for us. And it mattered a lot. In fact, I remember before I joined, in evaluating the company, I was like, wow, people love this product. This is the total asset. The asset is the love people have for this product. We're going to serve that asset. We're going to help. We're going to be, serve our community because they serve us and they echo us. And that turned out to be really a useful thing for Tableau.
Wow, wonderful. That's a great advice. And Elissa, if you compare, or not even compare, if you look back when you've joined Tableau, probably I'm just assuming Tableau was one of the first enters into the market in terms of the way you kind of can dissect the data, right?
Yeah.
But now you're advising a lot of companies, and probably
Yes.
now you may look at a pattern like it's not a first in the category anymore, but there are a lot of players, and then new age founders are coming in, raising Series A and Series B up to, and that's when the problem starts, right?
Yeah.
How do you scale from that stage to 100 million or $1 billion company? So do you think the product always needs to be a differentiating factor for marketing teams to take it more into the community, and or the messaging is more important than the product?
Well, I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, it certainly does help. But I think you need differentiation. And I don't 100% think that has to be in the product. It really can be in what you stand for and the people you have around you and the customers you attract. I work with a company that has a pretty good product, not a great product, but man, they're super, super service oriented, and their competitors are not. And so they just do really well with people where that matters, and the key is, okay, whatever you're differentiating on, does it matter to your market? Does it matter to your market? So for these guys, it's like, okay, it's good because they install faster, they stay up longer, they do updates without having to take you down, and it takes a lot less time, and they're always there. And if you have a problem, you can Slack them and you can reach them, and they're there to serve you. And so they built this idea of who they are around that. And I think that's a fine differentiating factor. I do think that's a fine differentiating factor. Now, the key is, again, for the market you're in, is that a good enough differentiating factor? If you're in a super hot, fast growing, fast changing space where people need the innovation, like so much of tech infrastructure, there's certain parts of it that are pretty stable and you need greater reliability, but there's other parts where people are innovating and inventing new stuff all the time. So if you're a great service, but you're not innovating and you're in an industry that's got to be innovating because it's changing so fast, that might not be a winning formula. That might not be a winning formula. You might catch a part of the market that only cares about stability and reliability and service, but there's a huge part of it that realizes, wow, innovation is really the key. So I don't think it has to be in the product, but it has to be something, and it has to be something that matters. It being in the product, because ultimately that's what people are buying. That's ultimately what the service that they're bringing into their companies is a good thing. But again, even your product is more than just your product, right? It's the people around it, it's the support they get, it's the feeling that you get. I mean, I really believe that there's a lot of emotion that goes into buying decisions in B2B even. Of course, I still believe strongly they're way more fact-based, and it's a committee and it's a group of people looking at criteria. But it does matter. Your brand and what you stand for and the emotions that you create do matter. Can you only differentiate that on emotion in B2B? Well, maybe, but I think, the better your product is and the more innovative you are and the faster you move, the better, but you can differentiate on other things. And I think it's just being honest with yourself. A company like this company I'm describing, trying to tell everybody we're super innovative, it just doesn't ring true. It just doesn't ring true. Okay, so be truthful about who you are. Be upfront about who you are, because that's what you'll attract. You'll attract people who value that. And if you attract people who value that, they'll give you higher value for what your product is. And higher value means, better for the customer and better for you. So I think it's really important to be true about what your differentiation is and what it is not.
Yes.
And founders are always bad about it, right? So do you think the
What's that?
marketer
Founders, yes.
Founders don't
Founders
even know
always
the
think
problems
about
that they're
the
solving. They don't even know the problems they're solving.
Yeah, oftentimes that's so true.
That's a whole
Another
nother
reason-
story. Like the core
totally.
problems, like the impactful stuff.
Yes. And actually back to what we were just saying about how valuable it is, especially salespeople talking to customers and being the voice of the customer. I mean, I think for us founder, it's like my other bit of advice is don't stop talking to customers. Don't stop talking to customers, and don't stop talking to users. Don't stop talking to the people who tell you the truth. You can go see the other CEOs of, multi-million, billion-dollar companies who barely know what your product does and your buddies or whatever. But God, don't stop talking to your users, because it keeps you real. And it keeps you truthful about what it is you bring and what's different about you, and maybe what's not different about you that you think is different. It's kind of a bitter lesson.
I love looking at the project management space now with the Asanas, the Notions, the ClickUps. One of the most competitive space with so much funding, and there are some that might be more innovative slightly than others, but I always look to Notion in particular from a community standpoint and how they've built it. And even though they might not be the most intuitive for the enterprise, they could do it, but like that, they might not be the right fit for a lot of them. Their feedback loops with their customers, with their friends, right? With their friends that are like building businesses off Notion templates for crying out loud. Like it's something like out there. And I'm curious, like, what were some good feedback loops that you've built that like really helped with marketing? Like that's one example with Notion, right?
Yeah. Well, for sure. I mean, for me, owning the community was a big deal, because it was a huge feedback loop, and being super engaged with social, even in the early days, was super important. And then just recognizing, like, we have people that, like, you should start to track who are your sort of like, I call them micro influencers, I think. I don't know. And I'm sure they have but I would look at, like, in our social media channels, like people would have 800 followers, 1,000 followers, that kind of thing. And they'd be talking about us. And I'd be like, well, that's somebody who's got, a bit of an audience. It's very small. And we didn't like, go out and do branding deals with them or whatever, but would take care of them. And again, I like this idea, there's this idea of the servant leader. And I kind of believe in the idea of the servant community leader, meaning, if you serve your community and you pay attention to the people that are paying attention to you and you take care of them, you'll get that back in spades. And so that's a channel that will tell you the truth. And again, but then going beyond just the data and seeing them, oh, look at that guy. It's actually reaching out to them and engaging with them in an authentic way. It's like making sure that they're taken care of and that you compliment them when you see great stuff or they may do something interesting. You let them know, hey, we see you. And then they become very committed, because at the end of the day, back to Notion and the enterprise motion and selling individually, I used to say, and I still say, we don't sell to enterprises. We sell to the people in enterprises. Don't ever forget that at the other side of that enterprise wall is a whole bunch of people that we have to create some kind of relationships with. And so you got to go beyond this idea of it's always about ROI and it's always about, some checklist of stuff or whatever. It's about people too. And I think that's what maybe Notion and has captured. And I think there's tons of other companies that have demonstrated you can go enterprise by being a people-oriented brand. I feel like Tableau was that way. Our mission was help people see and understand their data. And I always used to say the most important word in that phrase is the word people. We are a people-centered brand, and I think like a Notion, a Slack, another great example. I think
Airtable.
Airtable, another great example.
Spectacular.
That got to the enterprise because they understood at the end of the day, it's people, who are trying to do this damn thing on their darn computer. Excuse my French. They're trying to do something for their boss at the next meeting or some big strategic project, what have you. They still got to do something. And it comes down to like really understanding how can we serve them? How can we make their lives just a little easier and their day a little shorter?
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a great thing. You're not selling to enterprises. You're selling to people behind that enterprise.
Which is why, again, back to sales revenue leaders. I mean, it's just really important that the ones that recognize that are just gold. They're just gold. They all do, but I mean, many of them do, but some of them are just a little better at like seeing it as a series of relationships and bringing that relationship back to the company and helping the company build a series of relationships within that customer prospect. It's just great. Yeah.
Wonderful. And the next question is around how you've spent almost 12 years with Tableau, right? So you've joined as a VP marketing or even lesser than that, and then you've scaled it up to a CMO level along with the organization. And one big question a lot of marketers must be having on their mind when they're starting early stage startups now. Hey, can I grow into a CMO level, or do always founders bring in someone on top of me, right? How did you scale and how did you keep yourself to those learnings on moving up to a ladder of CMO level?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. I think it's for sure having an attitude of always learning. Being a lifelong learner is a really important thing because, God, man, even, I love that I serve on boards and I also advise a lot of CMOs because I love keeping in touch. But man, it's even changed so much, The basics, the elements, how, selling and marketing are still there, but there's so much that's changed technology-wise and how to reach people and, all that stuff. So it's very interesting for sure. So being a lifelong learner, I think, is number one. I think number two is being a great, servant leader. I mean, really being somebody who understands what your teams are going through. It isn't about, just like with your community, it isn't just about one way, here, I'm telling you to do this. Here, I'm telling you to do this. There's also this feedback, just as we no longer just broadcast advertise, we actually engage, and it goes both ways, right? Especially with social. It's the same with your teams, right? You really got to understand, okay, well, my head of digital, what is that person going through? What's their team going through? What are the challenges of that? Tell me about those challenges. So I guess in a lot of ways, it's being a listener, and really being able to take back sort of ideas and feedback and, direction, and doing that and showing that you're very open to that you're open to like, hey, I'm a learner too, just like all of us. And we're here to help each other. And I think by demonstrating some of those leadership qualities, you can kind of scale up. Now, for a lot of people, they love the thrill of the sub 10 million. They love that thrill. Fine, that's great. You get it to 10, it's not your thing to take it to 100. Okay, that's okay. Or maybe you do love the company, you love the mission, you love the idea of what they're doing, you believe it with passion, and you learn how to scale yourself. And you're open to feedback, and you take the feedback, you ask for feedback all the time, you take classes, you read a lot. Again, you're a lifelong learner. You are very open to the fact that people on your team are going to be better at a bunch of things that you're not that good at. And that's actually a job as a manager, as a leader, is to get the best out of people working toward a common goal in the most efficient and effective way possible. And so it's creating a team too. So I think anybody who starts a founder at the founder level, or just after that as a VP of marketing, head of marketing, can scale if that's what they want to do. But also, I think it's being honest about, do you love the journey still? Do you love the journey? Do you love what you're doing? And if you don't, it's just not fun. I mean, I used to tell people like the greatest gift I think you can give an employee is the opportunity to fully be themselves at work, because boy, you're not spending any time trying to pretend to be somebody you're not. And I think from day one for me, I really felt like when I walked in Tableau, I'm a pretty strong personality, and they were fine with that. so that was pretty, I could be myself. I really could be myself. And so I didn't have to spend any energy doing anything other than the best I could do for the company, because that's what I wanted. I wanted us to be great. I wanted us to do great stuff for our customers. I wanted to build a great brand. I wanted to see this organization do great work. I didn't have to pretend I was somebody different, or that I didn't know what I was doing, or even if I didn't know what I was doing, I would be asking and learning, and I was okay with that. But there's come a time when you say to yourself, this journey's not for me anymore. So I left Tableau after we hit $1 billion. And, I just said, I'm not sure I'm that interested in going that much further. It's getting pretty corporate. It's getting pretty much internal, a lot of negotiations internally. I'm a marketer, that's my thing, and so I was getting presented with projects that were basically fully baked, and approving them, and then arguing for budget, and, arguing with different, not arguing, but negotiating with other teams and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, I've got some kids at home that are pretty young. I don't think this is my part of the journey. I could have stayed, but I just decided it wasn't as much fun. And I think it's really important to be honest about like what your goals are. And again, if you want to scale, you can. And I did it, and I'm not anything that special at all, because I was interested. I had the passion for it and the interest, and I was willing to learn, and I was willing to learn from my colleagues who maybe were on my team, worked for me, but I knew, this person's better at this. We can do great work together. I just need to clear hurdles for him or her, and we just need to stay focused on the goals. Fine. Other people, it's about nurturing and developing them, learning how to nurture and develop people. But again, it's always about learning. It's always about like trying to figure out where the market's going next. And I think just having a passion and a deep interest in what you're doing is just going to help you do better, because it's just something you want to do intuitively. Yeah.
It's so fascinating that you use that anecdote when you're at the top. Just so much more to go through. My partner is the creative director, the top creative of a multi-billion-dollar, one of the magazines under a multi-billion-dollar umbrella,
Cool.
Cosmopolitan, and
Wow.
and she's like, she just got the job, and she did Airbnb mag. She's done all this stuff, and she's like, I can't just create anymore. She's like,
Yeah.
and so she's like feeling it. But it's building a different skill set that she doesn't have. Diplomacy.
Like you learn. Totally.
But
well, and it's really about like, is she interested in that skill set, right? Does she want to build that? Because you do, oh my God, the early days, I was literally like coding HTML. You know what I mean? I'm not an HTML coder, but you know what I mean? Like, so I was, you just start to get hands off. And so are you learning new things that you think are interesting and fun? And so for your partner, that's an amazing job, an amazing role, but only if she loves the idea of what she could bake out of it, and it does sometimes as a creative person take a little time to realize she's actually in a creative role. You know what I mean? Yeah. She's actually creating an environment. Yeah.
she's more of a director than a doer per se. But going into like women in leadership and the C-suite, you've done a phenomenal job. You're on numerous boards, you're teaching, but how could we get more women in the C-suite?
Yeah,
There's still
it's a great question.
there's still a massive gap, and
Yeah,
we
there
need to
still
call it
is.
out.
There still is. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, yeah, and even in a lot of the boards I serve on, I'm definitely the only woman. And I got to tell you, and I think this is important for men to understand. They might look at their e-teams and say, well, we've got a woman on it and one woman, or a board with one woman. I got to tell you, when you are more than one woman on a board or on an e-team, boy, it makes a big difference, So I do think there's something to the California requirement. I don't know if it's still a thing where they wanted 2 women on every board. And I think there's something to that. And so you're right. I think we need to get more women in executive roles. And I think that's just being open to the fact that they work differently. They think a little differently. And that's good. I mean, and diversity just in general, frankly, anybody, a person of color or just any kind of diversity makes teams better, obviously. And so I think it's not just a female problem, it's a problem overall. And I think it's a hard thing, but it's nurturing that talent. It's recognizing it. It's sometimes you might not even realize that you've got some talent on your team that could develop. And I think that's another thing is I see a lot of these high potential programs where people are selected by other people as high potential. And that's always bothered me because you know what? There's people that you don't recognize are high potential that are high potential. And so because maybe you have biases about what high potential looks like, even from a characteristic point of view, not just physical or personal, but even work wise, you might be missing out on a lot of things. So I think the opportunity, there's one thing we could do, which is allow people to express their interest more directly in, I want to be a high potential. I want to take additional training. I want to do things. I want to take on special projects, giving people more of a voice in expressing this is an interest of mine. Because I think, especially when it comes to diversity, we underestimate people's interests because we're not accustomed to seeing that people in certain kinds of roles. And so we don't often look for them, and sometimes we have shallow ideas about what they should look like from even from a work characteristics point of view, maybe there's a great person ready to lead your marketing team that doesn't come from brand and communications, even though that might be a big part. They come from another area. Maybe there's a great salesperson who just has this knack. And because often sales does get tracked to just sales, man, there's probably so much gold in your sales department for other kinds of roles that they could bring, that just looking outside and allowing people to nominate themselves or bring themselves forward as, I want to be part of something bigger and better. I think that's always something that I've espoused and believed in. Is like, give people the opportunity to stand forward and encourage them. Some of them might think I'll never get a shot at it. Well, yeah, but help them see the opportunity, help them see the possibilities. I think is one way to do it, and just recognize we got to do this. We got to be conscious about it. We got to be directly choosing to be this way. It's really easy to fall back into old habits and you don't even realize it. I was interviewing some people recently and I realized, oh man, I'm falling into an old habit of expecting this role to be a certain way, to behave a certain way, to have certain characteristics. And I just had to reframe myself to say, actually, this candidate over here that I didn't think for why didn't I like that candidate? The reasons aren't really, strong enough. Actually, this person's pretty incredible. So really being conscious, being more questioning of your choices. Like, why am I choosing this way? I think that would open people up to opportunities to find people in their organizations that maybe don't act like or look like what you think they should, but they actually have what it takes.
Love it. Wonderful. Every bit of the podcast. I'm waiting to listen it back again on the recording. And Elissa, slowly wrapping up with the last question, with the popular thing that's happening everywhere on Twitter and LinkedIn, that's about economic downturn, right?
Oh yes. Oh my
And
goodness.
with all the threat of that economic downturn, layoffs, employees worrying about their job security, like what can leaders do to keep their teams motivated? Any tips on how to make it through the slowdown?
Yeah. Yeah, I think being truthful about it. Look, this is a tough time, man. Number one, being truthful, but number two, being a pragmatic optimist or an optimistic pragmatist, because this is a cycle. We're gonna get through this. We gotta buckle down. We gotta focus. We're not gonna have as much budget as we used to have. We have to be a little more guerrilla. We have to work a little harder. I mean, this is a cycle. We're gonna get through this, and we're gonna come out of this stronger. But it's not going to be like this forever. It's not going to be like this forever. We're gonna come through this. You can just, you just look through history. I mean, this is cycles, man. These are cycles. This is what it is. Now, how long this cycle will be, I don't know. It might be long. It might not be. But I think just being transparent and being practical, but also optimistic, and like a practical optimism. Like, yeah, no, it's going to be great tomorrow. We're going to hit our numbers this quarter. You know what? Probably not. Probably not. And damn, yeah, we're going to have to cut budgets, and damn, we might have to cut people, but we're going to treat them fairly, whatever. But whatever, just being transparent, and then being practical, and then being optimistic about, like, this isn't going to last forever. We're going to get through this, and we're going to come out of this stronger. If we do things right, if we work together, if we make the right decisions together, and we're data driven, and we're smart about our markets, and we understand our customers and prospects. Yeah, we're tightening our belts. Yeah, it's going to be hard. But we're going to get through this, and we will come out stronger. I think that's the truth. I mean, we went through something like that back in 2008, 2009, 2010. And, we just kind of buckled down, reduced our focus to the most essential elements, and went forward with belief.
Yeah.
And
So that's a great opportunity for our marketers to kind of innovate. Right? How can you do the same or more with the less budget?
Totally. And you hate hearing that, but it's true. You're absolutely right, Laxman. It's like, hey, we're going to have to be a little more creative, a little more guerrilla, work a little harder, do the right things, make sure everything we're doing is the right thing. But we're going to have to act, and we're going to take advantage of opportunities to do exactly what you said, to innovate and to invent. I think that's a great point. Yeah. Yeah. So it's tough times, but hang in there. Stay true to who you are and what you do, and realize it's going to be hard, but you get through it.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Elissa. Thanks for your time and all the advice. Every question, every answer is like so awesome.
Thank you, Laxman. Thank you, Jared. It was really great to talk to you both. What a great podcast. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, cool. All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You have a good day. Bye-bye.